Hey, check out our brand new sponsor, Dynamic Solutions 2. That's the number 2. They offer a life-changing, dynamic financial solution. The finest in fast, professional, affordable credit repair. Is your credit in bad shape? Do you need a new car? Ready to buy a new house? You want to rent an apartment? Are you going to apply for a job? Any one of these activities, they're going to ask for a credit report and then check out your credit score. Let Dynamic Solutions 2 erase your negative credit remarks. They have affordable monthly prices. They accept Visa, MasterCard, PayPal options available. You go to www.dynamicsolutions, that's the number 2.com, or call 424-888-2820. 424-888-2820. Now, if you enter promo code ED or you mention Ed Opperman, you get a 10% discount. How's that? You get a free consultation, all negative items removed, get back in positive credit position. Dynamic Solutions 2, life-changing dynamic financial solutions. 424-888-2820. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. You get a 10% discount.
Are you ready to change your life but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
Hey you, podcast listener, this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. Take the blue pill. You wake up in your bed and go back to listening to mundane podcasts that won't challenge your religious beliefs and your so-called truths about reality, the universe, and consciousness. Take the red pill. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast, hosted by Mark Anthony Peterson, and he will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Event Horizon takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. It's the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast by Mark Anthony Peterson on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Stitcher, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Remember, all we are offering is the truth, nothing more.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You go to emailrevealer.com, get a copy of my book, my new and improved book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. That's there on emailrevealer.com. Also, to check out OppermanReport.com. That's the website for the show. And we have on there, we have a members section on there. We have a bookstore on there. We have a special documents section. And there's exclusive content. So if you join up OppermanReport.com, you can help support the shows that we do Friday night and Saturday night, but also you get access to exclusive content. And really help support the show. We really need your support. Unlike other people I hear that are raising huge amounts of money. But anyway, we got here a couple of great guys. We have Pierce Redmond from Brooklyn, and Tom Secker from the UK, nearby Manchester. And, and, you know, the sad part, we're just joking around off the air. These are really two cool guys, you know. Very few people in this business you could tolerate even a little bit, but these guys are really fun guys to hang out with. And we're talking about all different little inside jokes off the air. But we have Pierce Redmond from Porkins Policy and Tom Secker from SpyCulture.com. And there's another website you have too, right, Tom?
I don't have another website, but I do several podcasts on SpyCulture.com, or I have several podcasts on SpyCulture.com. But then, Pierce, you do 3 different podcasts, I guess, on Porkins Policy Review.
Yeah. I do Porkins Policy Radio, which I've had you on before, Ed. And I do Porkins Great Game with my friend Christoph Gehrman. And, of course, Tom and I do the CIA in Hollywood. And that's on both of our websites.
That's right. And I was just recently a guest on CIA in Hollywood. And I understand it's one of the highest rated, most responsive ever gotten from any other show before. That's what I've heard anyway. I've heard this through the grapevine. We did it about that movie with, that guy. Clooney, yeah, George Clooney. And, Good Night and Good Luck, which was a good movie. I liked it. And, we discussed some little back stuff about that. And that's available on both their websites. Today, we're going to be talking about The Writer with No Hands, which is really an incredible story. I stumbled upon this, some online article, I guess over a year ago. And, the book and the movie is done by this guy, Matthew Alford, I think it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And, I contacted him and says, oh yeah, I'll come on the show. Sounds great. And then, something happened. I don't know what happened. But he said he wasn't going to do any press on this at all. And then it turns out, coincidentally, he's buddies with both Pierce and Tom. So, Tom, why don't you give us a little backstory? What is this story about?
Well, it's about a Hollywood screenwriter called Gary DeVore, who was relatively big time in the 80s. I mean, he wrote a film for Kurt Russell. He wrote a film for Arnold Schwarzenegger, Raw Deal. I don't know if you've seen that, but I thought it was, it's not the greatest film in the world, but it's pretty good macho 80s action movie fare. He also wrote the adaptation of The Dogs of War by Frederick Forsyth, the author and occasional MI6 agent. And this guy did move in government circles to some extent. Exactly what his connection was and exactly how deep he was involved in all of that isn't clear, but he certainly had some kind of CIA and Pentagon connections. And then in the summer of 1997, he goes missing. He disappears. He'd been away from his home and his wife for a while because he was like on a writer's retreat, if you like. He was working on a script. And on his way back through the Mojave Desert, he just vanishes. No sign of him, no sign of his car. No one remembers him. No one had seen him. So it wasn't at all clear what had happened. A year later, he then turns up, or rather, after a tip-off, the police and the authorities search an aqueduct below the freeway that he was driving back home on, and his car is found buried in the water. And there's a body inside, which they presume is Gary. They presume this is who he is. This is what's happened to him. There's a lot that's amazing about what they find or don't find in this car. For example, his laptop is missing, the scripts, his notes, all of his research material. None of that is found. Perhaps most weirdly, the body, the corpse that's in the vehicle, has no hands. It's missing its hands. So, obviously, this leads to some suspicions. People sort of look at this and think this isn't just some regular accident. This isn't just some regular crime. And then when you dig in a bit deeper, you find out that the script that he was working on was all about the invasion of Panama in 1989, and that he seemed to have discovered a real reason, or one of the deep, disturbing reasons why that invasion took place. And a different version starts to emerge. You start to think, was this guy whacked by either people within the government or people who used to be in the government who have something to protect, something to hide? And yeah, where do you want to go from there with it, Ed?
It's a good question. First of all, I guess let's start with this. What could have gone on? The invasion of Panama. Actually, got this guy Noriega, big coke dealer. You got him with Rumsfeld. Panama banks. Obviously, we know what went on in Panama. What could be such a revelation that they would? What could be the secret that they're hiding in Panama besides the coke and the mass graves that went on in that invasion? What could it be?
Well,
go on.
Oh, I was going to say that, the title of the screenplay that Gary DeVore was working on was called The Big Steal. So it had in part to do with the looting of several Panamanian banks by CIA military officials. But according to people that knew the big steal and knew what DeVore was working on, there are allegations that he had also included several very revealing parts in the film that not only were they stealing money, but they were stealing blackmail tapes of very prominent U.S. and other country officials with underage children. So that is partly what was included in the big steal. But I think larger picture, Gary DeVore was also just talking about the invasion of Panama itself, and again, we going after our former buddy and coke dealer Noriega. But that is alleged to have been the big thing. That's what really upset people when they found out that that's what he was writing about, these sex tapes or blackmail tapes.
Okay, that's very interesting. Let me ask you this. This guy, Matt Alford, how well do you guys know him?
Relatively well, yeah. I've known Matt pretty well for the last, 18 months, 2 years maybe.
Okay, so
we know him well.
No, okay, so but you got in touch with him about this story.
Oh yeah, we talked. Yeah. I was just talking with him a couple of weeks ago. He's a little fickle with interviews, believe me.
Yeah. But the thing is, no, that's a good question. Okay, but now you met him through looking into this story. That's how you came in contact with him originally.
Well, actually, I got in contact with him because he's an academic who works in the whole field of government involvement in Hollywood and the entertainment industry. He wrote a book back in 2010 called Real Power, which is all about the Pentagon in Hollywood and how U.S. military and U.S. warfare is portrayed through Hollywood. So that's kind of that. That's what he did his PhD on. That's what his initial, at least, expertise is on. So I was talking to him about that. I did know that he'd also written on the Gary DeVore thing, but it was only after I got to know him well, or somewhat well, that I found out that, he was writing this book, that he'd made this film, that he'd done this big investigation into Gary DeVore. It wasn't that specifically that first got me in contact with Matt, but it is very much one of the things that, fascinates me about his work.
Okay. Now, is he like a well-known guy in the UK?
Relatively.
Okay. And now, what is his theory on what's going on here? I haven't seen the movie. So one thing, I haven't seen the movie. First of all, where can someone get this movie? Or the book is obviously on Amazon, but if they want to catch this movie, is it available anywhere online?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's in the final stages, I think, of post-production, and they're looking at the kind of marketing for it over the next year or two. There was a version of this film that has been shown in various filmings and in a few film festivals and things. That version, it seems, has now been not scrapped as such, but quite heavily altered. It's been re-edited, at least. And that's the version that me and Pierce have seen.
And you got this because Matt sent it to you?
Yeah, just as a preview thing, as a favor, wanted a bit of feedback and all of that, yeah.
Okay, so then let's get an idea. Now, what is his theory behind all this?
That's a tough one. One of the great parts about Matt's book is beyond talking about the way that intelligence agencies manipulate Hollywood and the connections and the sort of murder mystery to all of it, is also the fact that he spent years very deeply involved in this. He traveled to Los Angeles several times. He knows Wendy DeVore, Gary's wife. He knows a lot of, he met Michael Sands, who's this really fascinating character who was DeVore's agent, but also might have also been involved with the CIA. And a lot of what he talks about in the book is just that he's not really sure what happened. And through the book and through just talking with him, I don't know if it seems like a case that you'll never really solve. That unless someone comes forward and says, yeah, we, bumped him off, or this is where he is, this is, what happened. I don't know if you'll ever really solve it. But I think, I don't know. I want to exactly talk for Matt, but it seems very clear that DeVore went missing that night. and various people, including the CIA's own Chase Brandon, who's ran the first Hollywood liaison office, or the publicly known one in the 90s. He went to DeVore's house. He took documents and things like that. There were the mysterious black helicopters that flew around on when the truck was being pulled out of the water.
Well, wait a second. This guy, he went to Alfred's house, not DeVore's house, and took documents under what authority?
Well,
under his own, I guess.
As far as we know, he just sort of turned up there and he was looking around Gary's office and having a look on his computer. We don't really know why. I mean, this may have been part of a cover-up. It may have just been that someone gave him a phone call and said, can you go and look into this? Can you go and find out more about this? Because we're not sure what happened. It's really not clear what, if any, role Chase Brandon has in this. It's simply that Wendy DeVore reports that, within days of this body being found. Actually, no, sorry. I think it was within days of him disappearing.
Yeah,
Chase Brandon turned up and was kind of rifling through things.
But how did he get in there? Did she let him in?
Not as far as I know.
Well, they did know each other because Gary DeVore was Tommy Lee Jones' best man at his wedding, and Tommy Lee Jones' first cousin is Chase Brandon. So presumably they met at least at the wedding, and one can assume that based on the role that Chase Brandon has played in Hollywood, that they would have known each other somewhat. So perhaps it wasn't so odd that him showing up necessarily.
Okay, so they meet over the chocolate fountain, okay? And then suddenly this guy's going to show up. Okay, let's just accept it for what it is. Okay, somehow he gets in there and under his own authorities, he's going through his stuff. No, I have another question now. You mentioned at the beginning that there was a tip-off that this vehicle was found in this aqueduct. Do we know where that tip came from?
I'm not 100% sure if we know the name of the person, but in one of his articles, Matt described them as a out-of-work DoD contractor.
So
someone had worked for the Pentagon. Which begs the question, how did they know? And it does... I mean, this is the thing. They had kind of looked at the aqueduct before. They had kind of reasoned, okay, he disappeared on this track of road at this time. Maybe some accident happened. But because of where the truck was and the physics of the whole thing, for that to have made sense as an accident, he would have had to be driving down the road. He does a U-turn for no obvious reason, drives the wrong way back down that stretch of road that he'd just driven up, probably with his lights off because no one noticed him. No one noticed the car going in that direction. He then, for no obvious reason, veers off, goes through a small gap between two, concrete walls, flies off the road and down into the aqueduct. Why? I mean,
while cutting his hands off.
And somehow this process ends up with him with no hands left. Yeah. And there's no sort of explanation. It's not like there was, a huge bit of windscreen that broke that then sliced his hands off or something like that. I mean, the official hypothesis, in as much as there is one, is that the fish ate his hands, or
that the airbag went off and that damaged his hands, and these giant fish in the aqueduct ate them.
Are there?
Should also, maybe now's a good time to note that they find the car. And I just looked it up. It's Doug Crawford is the amateur detective who somehow figured out that DeVore was in the aqueduct. And very interesting is that Wendy DeVore received a mysterious phone call early that morning. And and someone on the other line said, "Miss DeVore, they've found the car. Stand by for further information." But the car was not actually found until several hours later. No one even knew about it at that point. And Wendy, at least Matt posits in the book, that Wendy thinks that this was that they were being sloppy because, in DC it was early in the morning, but in LA it was, like 5, 6, 4 in the morning there. So somebody knew beforehand, before these divers went in the water, that there was that the car was there. Then, of course, the hands are found. I believe it's in some other part of the car. The hands are found, and famously, when the hands were tested, they were of a 200-year-old person.
That's right. I remember reading that.
Yeah. And if you look at Matt has some pictures in the book itself of some of the hand bones, because Wendy DeVore didn't trust the people around her, didn't trust the coroner, and again the coroner's coming up with this, it was just a silly accident or something like that. And Wendy DeVore actually hired a private coroner by the name of Dr. David Posey, and he had two specialists, Dr. Bird and Dr. Sweet, that were one was a DNA specialist and the other one I believe was a dental forensic specialist. And they also determined that these bones could have been from a 200-year-old person, and Matt got a copy of their coroner's report, and if you look at the bones, they look like rock. They don't even look like bone. So just off of that alone, they look bizarre. And in that, at what point when they were conducting the autopsy, they told her that it was murder. Then they changed their mind, basically said to get on with your life. Nothing to see here, blah, blah, blah. So, I don't know. So something odd even with the second coroner's report.
Okay. I know I'm jumping around. Okay. But bear with me. Now, Matt Alford, how is he funding all this, his investigation and his work and his research into all this? How is he funding this?
He's a working academic, and he had written about this case somewhat. I mean, we're going back best part of 10 years now. So he has been involved in it for a long time. When he went out to LA in, I think it was 2011, when he and this filmmaker went out there to interview various people, Wendy DeVore, various private investigators and people who'd looked into this. They even got a apparently very high-level former government official to go on camera and talk about this case. And that's really something that when the film comes out, you'll watch that interview and you will be a bit spooked by it, if nothing else. He basically he paid for it out of his, his salary, his money. This was not exactly a hobby. I think that would be to degrade it somewhat. I think that would be slightly insulting if I called it just a hobby, but it was a sideline for him. It was something he funded and did out of his own time and his own fascination with it.
What would we be spooked about that portion of the interview that you talked about?
Well, the guy mentions, among other things, that I think he himself had asked a couple of questions about this case, and that one of the responses he'd got was that he was emailed a link to a website, and when he visited it, it was full of some very, pornographic material, but very dubious pornographic material, the sort of thing that probably has child porn and possibly even snuff videos and things like that on it, and that he took this as a form of warning or possibly even potential blackmail. If you go any further down this road, you ask any more questions, we're going to say, look, you've been visiting this horrible website. And it just gives you a sense of what kinds of machinations the deep state is capable of, regardless of what their role in this is. I mean, I know the temptation is to say, okay, he was whacked because of the screenplay. That's entirely possible. Matt doesn't in any way deny that that's entirely possible. Obviously, that was one of his suspicions when he was deeply working on this case. He just didn't come up with any conclusive evidence, and he said so. So maybe they're just covering up for something else. Maybe they're covering up for people outside the government. But whatever, they're certainly capable of some pretty nasty and manipulative things in order to try and warn people off and hush this thing up and try and get people away from talking about it and looking into it. So there's clearly something to this case. There's clearly something quite important, I think, to this case. Because if they're doing things like that to people who are just sort of making inquiries, then Lord knows what they're capable of. They're certainly capable of whacking Gary DeVore. I think we can all agree on that much.
Yeah. Now, what about Matt, though, now? Because if they went to all these efforts to go after DeVore, and now here's Matt doing this movie and this book, and suddenly he's hesitant about, because he told me he was supposed to go on Alex Jones, and suddenly he's shied away from promoting this at all. Do you think he's been threatened or anything?
I mean, he did receive what's described in the film as a kind of informal warning to maybe stay away from the case, but that was before he even went out to Los Angeles. With Matt, it was more that having devoted all this time to it and then kind of being left with, if you like, more questions than answers, but enough answers to be very, very suspicious, and enough answers that he does conclude this wasn't an accident, that Gary DeVore did not die in an accident. So he was either murdered, or there's some bizarre, he's disappeared and covering his trail through this bizarre event and this unsolvable mystery. It's kind of either one of those two. Matt, his struggle, I think, is also a personal one, that he got to a point with this where he was so frustrated and that he didn't know where to go next with it. And so the answer was he had to back away a bit for his own good, for his own sanity, for the, he's got kids, he's got a career, he's got other things in his life. It's not like, and I think this did, for a certain period, it became something of an all-consuming obsession for him. And all-consuming is probably pushing it too far. It did become a bit of an obsession for him, and I don't think that did him a huge amount of good. And I think he recognized that, and that's why he's written the book, and he said, if you want to know what I think about DeVore, if you want to know what I found, read the book. And people really should, because it's a brilliant book. It's one of the best books I've read in years.
Yeah, and it's a cautionary tale, too, as Tom was saying, the level to which people can get consumed with something. I think Matt kind of, he's always said to us, he went as far as he possibly could with this case. It looked at every angle, turned over every stone, ran up every lead possible. And there's only so much you can do with that before you can, you start seeing DeVore's murderer everywhere, So it's a cautionary tale in the book as well for anyone out there in the research community. Sometimes it's good to put the research down for a little while, take a step back.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, wait, neither of you guys have kids, all right?
No.
Yeah, see? Yeah. But also too, it's kind of like, okay, this is the life we have chosen, right? That's a quote from The Godfather. I usually throw in a little cough when I do that, but this is the life we have chosen, right? And when you kind of, you want to promote it at the end, you want to talk about it. No? Isn't there that too?
Yeah.
But not this guy. He's a different kind of guy.
I think he's happy promoting the book. I think he's happy. I mean, he is doing, he's doing a bunch of gigs that involve readings from the book and elements of music and stand-up comedy and things. So he is promoting it in that way. I think it's more he doesn't want to do interviews about the case itself.
Gotcha.
He's happy to promote the book, but he doesn't want to. He's kind of said what he's got to say about Gary DeVore. He's concluded it wasn't an accident. He's presented the information and the evidence that he's got. What more can he really do? Is, I think, the way he's coming at it. And he doesn't want to just keep turning the same thing over and over and over when, for at least maybe a year now, he's taken a step back from it.
I think he also just doesn't want his career to be defined as he's the Gary DeVore guy. Like Tom, you've had that with 7/7.
Right.
Which isn't something I talk a huge amount about anymore, because I've kind of said what I've got to say about it, and if people want to read it and watch my documentaries and everything, they're all out there. So I I don't tend to talk about that much anymore. So I definitely relate to Matt on that score.
Okay. Well, no, I was reading your review of this. The name Private Investigator Don Crutchfield came up, right? And it appears that he wrote a book about this as well, right?
I believe so, yes.
Now, what is his theory?
I can't remember Crutchfield's theory off the top of my head. I actually don't think Crutchfield ever published his book. He has a large manuscript, but correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but I think Crutchfield is the guy who got into the whole legal battle with Wendy DeVore over rights to the story and whatnot. And he claims that she owes him money or something like that. And he wouldn't allow Matt access to his work. I think that's who Crutchfield is.
Yes, as I remember, that's correct. I mean, again, we're not the experts on this, and sadly Matt is, but he doesn't want to be interviewed on it, which I understand for people and for you, Ed, is a bit frustrating. But
no, not at all.
As I recall, that's how he fits into this. He did have some, correspondence and discussion with Matt, and again, he's one of these people who sort of went down the path and said, "Yeah, I think there is something really deep to this. I think he was assassinated, or at least, it's certainly possible." But never really gave up any solid evidence and never really presented a firm theory of, okay, well, if he was whacked, who did it and why and how? And so Matt met a bunch of these people and corresponded with them over a period of years and found, again, that he's kind of banging his head against a brick wall, that so many of them would sort of open the door, but never really put what they had on the table and say, this is what's going on here. There's a great bit in the film, and he describes this in the book as well, where they went and talked to Michael Sands, Gary DeVore's agent, and Matt had been in correspondence with this guy for quite a long time. And the guy just starts, leafing through old photo albums and showing them old pictures of himself and him and Gary together and stuff like this, and was never really giving them any meat. And Matt kind of, in the book, he presents these as like a group of clowns, people who are just parading on top of this tragedy in order to, I don't know, further themselves, get a bit of limelight, get a bit of notoriety, whatever. But that he didn't find most of these people, not all of them, but most of them, that credible or that sincere, I think.
Well, Michael Sands shows them a picture. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it's in the movie, and it's definitely mentioned in the book. There's this of what he purports to be him and Muammar Gaddafi, and then it turns out that wasn't real. That it was just, it was some guy that looked like him in the photo when Matt actually looked into it. Yeah, a lot of self-promotion, which makes sense. They're all in Hollywood. There's another PI, Dennis O'Keefe, who also did work on the DeVore case, and he's, his whole thing is that it was all an accident, get on with your life. And he came up with this theory that the airbags ripped his hands off somehow. And again, there was no evidence when DeVore went missing that, there was not guardrails ripped off of this little bridge. There was nothing on the bridge that would have indicated that he made a U-turn, went against traffic with his lights off, and then went through this small 15-foot hole. There's nothing like that going on. And the coroner, I believe Dr. Posey, the private coroner, he stated in his report that while there was damage to the front end of the car, there were no indications of anything on DeVore's body that would have indicated him crashing and going off into the aqueduct. And there was some weird stuff going on that night as well. There were these strange roadblocks, one of which supposedly was near to the bridge where DeVore was. And that's one of the theories, is that because he had a gun and he had weed in his car, he didn't want to get pulled over. And the roadblocks were because of some knife-wielding guy that robbed a convenience store, but he was never found. They dropped the case immediately. The roadblocks went away. So some strange thing. I don't know if that's necessarily related. People can come at that their own way, but there's weird stuff going on that night as well.
Okay, this might be a good time to take a break. Okay, let's take a little commercial break here. Okay. The knife wielding stick up man on the roadblocks, missing hands, it's all coming together now. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be right back after this. Now, also too, when I'm muting you guys up, I'm hearing one of these. I think it's you, Pierce. So can you guys mute up your mics during the break so we don't have all that static?
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll be right back after this message. We are here with Tom Secker from SpyCulture.com and Pierce Redmond from PorkinsPolicyReview.com. Two fascinating guys with a lot. And I tell you, it's so funny because we're talking about this story, and we're talking about these people are self-promoters. We run into those people all the time. They come like, there's so much you got to take with a grain of salt. It's becoming so war weary. So I could just imagine what this guy Alfred had to put up with these characters, Muammar Gaddafi lookalikes, and the whole thing. So we'll be right back. with more of this information after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at PureSoapFlakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Tina Helmuth is writing an ongoing series of fact-fiction books that boldly takes on today's most heinous crimes, the abduction, sexual trafficking, and cannibalization of our children. Suffer the Little Children, The Wrath of the Father, and Unbreakable. Deeply researched and mixed with the supernatural, good versus evil makes these thrillers hard to put down, shining a light on the root cause of these crimes and introducing a spiritual solution. Justice will be served. Available at Lulu.com in paperback or ebook.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
And this show is brought to you by, well, I don't even want to say that. Now we are back with our guests, Pierce Redmond and Tom Secker. Pierce Redmond is from Porkins Policy Review and Tom Secker from SpyCulture.com. Couple fascinating guys here. They're fun guys to hang out with too. I did some, I actually contacted this guy, Crutchfield, about coming on the show. And he did write a book about this story, The Case of the Missing Screenwriter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's an ebook, but there's a Facebook page about it and everything, and it's definitely about the Gary DeVore case. There's no doubt about that. And it's so unusual for Crutchfield to be complaining about not getting paid everything he's owed. It's just, PI's never, people are so generous with us, in our work and at the time we put in on this stuff. It's really unusual. Okay. Is there any chance this guy DeVore was, when he went away on this trip, any evidence that there was someone else there with him and he was meeting with someone else? Where did he go to? A cabin or something? What was it? A hotel, motel?
I think he went to a place that he had gone to several times before, in the Mojave Desert, that he went when he had writer's block or when he wanted to just write. I believe it was a place that him and his wife owned, but I'm not 100% on. Again, Matt would know better than me. But I don't think there was well, there's that weird phone call that he gives to Wendy DeVore. I think there was something like they would always call no matter what, just to say goodnight. And he calls Wendy DeVore when he's driving back to Los Angeles. And the phone call is very bizarre. And Wendy thinks that there was someone else in the car with him when and the way he talked and the phrases that he used, it didn't sound like him. And she always thought that there was someone else in the car with him, perhaps making him say those things. But I mean, that's entirely speculation. It's entirely possible, though. I would assume somebody visited him, or at least at some point during the drive. I mean, if someone was in the car, that might have been an easier way to kill him. certainly, than, or maybe he was killed. Maybe he was never driving. Maybe he was killed at his house, at the house or the hotel, and then his body disappeared. I don't know.
Or at the roadblock, they could have got him there. Because obviously there's no way he drove with no hands.
Right. No, that had to be, after.
You don't have to be the great Doug Crutchfield, Don Crutchfield, to come up with information like that. That's but anyway.
We should say that Gary DeVore, was, I think his connection to the CIA is more than he knew some people. There is some photo floating around that again, much to Matt's disappointment, he could never find. But supposedly of him at Area 52, not Area 51, but I think it's Area 52 in some sort of stealth bomber.
Oh,
and
really?
That was also sort of confirmed by another acquaintance of Gary's, a producer who he had worked with. There was one of his, I think it was his second wife, remembered going into his office when he was writing to ask him something, and he flipped out and told her never to come in here when he was working. And she claimed that she saw Russian Cyrillic writing on his computer.
I thought you were going to say it was going to be barely legal teens, but okay.
No, she said that she saw some sort of Russian writing.
Oh, really?
And there were other, reports that he was in Panama briefly, and that he had also been in El Salvador at some point. And what is his greatest movie, that he had full control over, wrote it, produced it, and I think he even directed it, right, Tom? Tracks?
I'm not sure if he directed it. He certainly wrote it. It was certainly his. Yeah, it was his film.
And there are scenes in that movie which are like straight out of scenes of brutality in places like El Salvador. And it's if anyone wants to know who Gary DeVore is, I would definitely go to YouTube and look up the movie Tracks. It's amazing. And it's got an incredible cast, and it's a super bizarre movie, but that's very much, there's elements of what Gary was all about in that film, but there are definite homages to the violence that was going on in Central America. So I think if he was in fact connected, I don't think it was just, he wrote, stuff favorable to the CIA, because he didn't really do that so much. I think he really did have some form of a closer relationship, and might have even been to places like Panama. I mean, if the Big Steal was truly about U.S. government forces going in and stealing blackmail tapes of politicians with underage children, I think his connection to the CIA was a lot, closer than most people would have you think.
Well, and two other things on excuse me, two other things on that score. The producer that he is supposedly in this picture with, I believe, was Walter Mirisch, who is actually the producer of the very first film to film at Langley, at the CIA headquarters, a film called Scorpio. So make of that connection what you will. The other thing is Michael Sands, Gary DeVore's agent, reportedly, when Chase Brandon left the CIA's entertainment liaison office, he basically took all of his stuff with him. He didn't leave any paper records, and if you try and FOIA this stuff now, they just say they haven't got it, and they probably don't. So his replacement, Paul Barry, apparently hired Michael Sands to go and, reach out to people in Hollywood and start sort of rebuilding a network there. So he's right in the middle of that world as well, it seems. And the Michael Sands thing, I mean, we certainly should get into this, because shortly after Matt got back from Los Angeles, he spoke to Michael Sands via Skype again. This is all in the film. And he was like, we really need to sort of try and push this. We need to try and get some more on this. And Sands was being his usual evasive, but kind of reassuring, but also very evasive self. And not long after this, Michael Sands dies in a very bizarre way that could be a complete, could just be he died in that way. It could actually mean something more deep than that. Pierce, do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, poor Michael Sands was in a upscale LA supermarket with his daughter, I think.
Oh, that's right.
And
Yeah. Okay.
he went to, one of those sample stands and he had a sample piece of meat like salami or something, and he ended up choking and dying in the supermarket. And I believe like nobody tried to resuscitate him or something. So he effectively spent the last 9 days on Earth in a coma. So very bizarre way to go. And yeah, like Tom said, maybe there's nothing to it, but given the people that he the circles that he ran with and the things that he was involved with, DeVore alone, it's somewhat suspicious that he just chokes and dies in a supermarket in the middle of Los Angeles. And again, this is like just after he is talking with Matt. So very strange, and a very strange way for him to go out.
And you say that he was with his daughter. How old was his daughter?
Oh, I don't know. She's like I think probably in her 30s or something.
Okay, all right. So that's it. Well, yeah, but how would you pull that off, though? If you're going to poison the salami.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
No. That would be a very difficult one. I mean, just completely hypothesizing here for a moment. Maybe he was poisoned earlier in the day, and this was just the thing that actually set him off. I mean, maybe it's just a coincidence that whatever it was that killed him just as he's at this deli counter. Maybe the deli counter doesn't have anything to do with it. There is a good moment in the film where Matt's saying, that there wasn't any CCTV of this, that you can only see the CCTV of like him walking into the store, and it, the rest of it wasn't properly covered by the cameras. And there again, it's one of those things where it's tantalizing. It's tempting to think, oh, that was deliberate. But, maybe it wasn't. Maybe this guy genuinely choked to death on a piece of salami in a supermarket, and their CCTV cameras happened not to cover the deli counter. It's entirely possible. It's also entirely possible that this guy was poisoned because, once again, there was a bit of attention on the DeVore case, and it looked like it might actually go somewhere. It's very difficult. This is the challenge that Matt faced in a very, very deep and very serious investigation into this, and that we've faced in a lot of topics that we've looked into. Is how deep do you want to get into this, and how much do you want to let suspicion drive you? And you can have 100 suspicious things, but still not have evidence of something real.
Right, coincidences do happen.
All the time.
Yeah, but then also, sometimes it's right in your face, especially when you got missing hands. Now, the movie Tracks you were talking about, that's TRAXX, right?
Yeah.
Now, this guy DeVore, okay, if he's traveling down to Noriega, Panama, right? Did he have is any indication that he was involved in drug dealing or drug smuggling?
No, I don't.
I don't think so. No.
Consuming drugs for sure.
Yes.
There's a couple of anecdotes in the book about his cocaine and stuff like that. But I mean, again, this was the 80s when everybody was doing coke in Hollywood. I mean, everyone is still doing coke in Hollywood, but then it was it was totally fine. But yeah, other than that, I don't think there's anything really connecting him to drug trafficking.
I love how he ran it up. Well, these were the 80s, that decade nobody remembers, or denies. You deny everything you did.
Yeah.
Wendy DeVore, what's her story these days? What is she doing? Do we know?
Well, you tried to interview her, did you not? You tried to get in touch with her and tried to get an interviewer with you, didn't you, Ed?
No, Wendy DeVore, no.
Oh, I thought you said you had. Maybe it was someone else who mentioned that to me. I mean, you certainly you can get in touch with Wendy DeVore if you really want to, but you got to appreciate she's a widow whose husband disappeared and then turns up dead, it seems,
right,
in the most kind of bizarre and challenging and unresolved circumstances. And I think, I mean, the way it comes across in the film is initially when Matt and William, the filmmaker, went out to LA and they interviewed her and talked with her and she introduced them to people, it was going pretty well. But the problem was, because they couldn't come up with any firm conclusion, because they couldn't, push this over the finish line, it did get a bit tetchy. It did get a bit difficult at one point. And there is a moment in the film that's quite difficult to watch where you can really see her pain and her hurt coming out. And as with a lot of these things, my position is don't bother people who are bereaved, people who are grieving. You don't want to intrude on that unless it's absolutely necessary. And so I think she's, I'm sure, still in her own way, thinking about this and trying to figure something out. But to my knowledge, she's not pursuing any more active investigations into this, no.
But what is her theory, though?
Well, she, at least the way Matt experienced her, she didn't offer theories. She presented herself as, what's the phrase he uses? The keeper of the facts. She simply, gathered the evidence and tried to give it to people and tried to get people interested in this. But she didn't see it as her role to investigate. I mean, she's not an investigator. She's not a detective. She is also obviously completely subjective because she's so involved in this. It's her husband, for God's sake. So, yeah, I don't know that she has any particular theory about this. And I know you keep asking this, Ed, as to, what are the different theories that people have put forward. A lot of people have talked about this case. A lot of people have hinted or even just said, oh, yeah, I think Gary DeVore was whacked. But to my knowledge, no one's come up with any, a firm hypothesis of how this would have happened. A lot of people have kind of talked around the subject and not really put it out there as to what they believe. And again, that's up to them, I guess. People can say or not say as they choose, but it's a frustrating one because of that. We're all sitting here thinking there's got to be something to this, and there almost certainly is, but I can't tell you what that is.
Right.
And I feel your pain because,
No, I'll get over it. Don't worry about me. But, but no, another thing that comes to my, dawns on me here is that, if I'm in business with someone or someone's going to expose my business, right? And I got to get rid of this guy. Okay. The last thing I'm going to want to do is make it this big, where the car is in an unusual kind of car crash and the hands are missing, and his stuff is gone, wouldn't you want to make it, if you have those kind of resources that you could pull that off, first of all, you could do stuff, you could make an overdose in the guy's hotel room and much easier to get away with that. So I guess the theory when I was reading your review was that, is this a warning to other journalists and other investigators, to kind of back off?
You have to look at the symbolism of the hands.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like in The Godfather where they shoot the guy, they shoot him through the eyes because he saw too much. Things like that. Or you shoot a snitch, you shoot them in the mouth. It's as a warning. It's a symbolic thing. It's almost a ritual thing to say to other people, don't do this. This is what ends up happening to you. And so, why are his hands missing? Well, his hands were the things that he used. They were his weapons, if you like. They were the things he could use to cause some damage or at least cause some trouble here. He was a writer. That was his skill. That was his trade. That was what he was good at. And they, presumably whoever killed him chopped his hands off to say, anyone else out there thinking of writing these sorts of scripts and challenging, using Hollywood to try and challenge the government and the establishment in this way, this is what's going to happen. Because like you say, Ed, why not just fake a suicide, fake an overdose?
Yeah.
Why not just, kill him somewhere and disappear him so no one knows what's happened? No one knows whether he's there or not, or whether he's just run off to Cuba with, a floozy or something. There's any number of ways you could do this that would have made for a simpler murder and a simpler cover-up. But instead, you get this gigantic mystery that is going to suck in people's attention and is going to suck in investigators and people who want to try and figure these things out for themselves. And it has, more than...
Yeah, now there's a movie about it. Yeah, like if the guy disappeared, Now there's
more than most cases anyway. There's been books written about it, there's been films on it, there's been various investigators, there's been at least some mainstream and quite a lot of alternative media coverage. So... yeah, like you say, why not just do it more simply? The answer would presumably be as some sort of a warning, as a form of psychological warfare.
Okay, but my question is now was this guy known as a writer? Because really, everything you tell me about him is a filmmaker. Why not stick a remote control in his mouth and kill him, Like, why, it doesn't really, was he known as a writer more than a filmmaker?
Oh, yeah, he is a screenwriter. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
That's what he was known for. Like Raw Deal, Dogs of War. But he wrote other things. He was well. He dated Janet Jackson for a while. He was very good friends with Julia Phillips, the producer of Taxi Driver and Close Encounters. He was well known in Hollywood. I think he's much more of a Hollywood insider, but he was certainly, Julia Phillips gave the eulogy for DeVore's funeral. So he's definitely, new people in Hollywood. I mean, again, Tommy Lee Jones' best man. He's not nobody.
Right. How long was he dating Janet Jackson?
I think briefly, but that is one of the people. I think he was married 3 times. Dated a lot of Priscilla Barnes. He dated. He was married to Claudia Christian, who of Babylon 5 fame, for anyone out there. So definitely a bit of a ladies' man. I think too, going back to what you were saying before in terms of sending a message.
Yeah.
I think it's also sending a message about a topic that is never covered in Hollywood, and that is Iran-Contra and the stuff that was going on in Central America. It's almost never really touched. There's never, other than this movie, which never got made, nothing has ever come close to talking about what was going on in Iran-Contra. That's a topic that no producer will touch. No one is writing anything about that. No major director is going to attach their name. I think the closest that anything came to that is a movie that, again, never got made with Sigourney Weaver, which had mention of Iran-Contra, and the Pentagon basically said, we're not going to cooperate unless you take out everything that makes what went on in Iran-Contra look bad. So I think this is also a message, and that's something that I know Matt has said to me before, is that Iran-Contra is one of these topics that you cannot cover in a film. There's been no film about it. So I think that's also another message, is just this topic is off the table, and any topic that gets near to something like that, we're not really doing movies about CIA cocaine trafficking or drug trafficking. And even when it's mentioned in movies like American Gangster, it's like 1 or 2 rogue military guys that are shipping heroin. It's not, no, this was like a top-down, fully functioning, corporation within the CIA shipping heroin. Well, so it's always got to be a rogue element. Whereas I believe in what was in The Big Steal was, no, this was a very organized group that was, operating in Panama.
Well, that movie with Mel Gibson and who was that guy?
Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey,
Air America.
Right, yeah. They in Vietnam, not more recently, yeah. What were we going to say, Tom?
Just to flesh that one out, there is Air America in the very early 90s, but that's, the only movie I think that's ever really been made, or Hollywood comedy that's ever been made about the Golden Triangle and the drugs in Vietnam. The film that you were talking about, Pierce, was called Countermeasures.
Yeah.
And this was one that was blocked by the Pentagon because they said basically we don't want to remind the public of Iran-Contra and we don't want to embarrass the White House with this, this charade. There is also, if you look at a film like Clear and Present Danger, not that that's set in Iran-Contra, but it is set around the same part of the world and some of the same sorts of operations.
Right.
That film, the book, is considerably more hard-hitting, you might say, than the film, and that is because the film was rewritten. The script was entirely rewritten over a period of 4 or 5 months by the Pentagon, and they changed numerous aspects of it in order to fit in with their desired public image. And this is going on in the mid-1990s. This is when these, Clear and Present Danger was made and when Countermeasures was blocked. And so you then have to think, with it, around the same time, Gary DeVore is working on this script about Panama, about all kinds of nefarious things involved with that. And this isn't just a script that he was writing. This had been greenlit. He had, backing for this. This was a film that was in pre-production. It was going to be made. He was going to produce and direct it. It was going to be his baby. He had control over it. this wasn't just something that, he was privately working on. Studios knew about this, Hollywood knew about this, and therefore we can only assume the CIA, the Pentagon, whoever else knew about this. So you look at it and you think, if they're capable of that kind of censorship, would they kill a screenwriter in order to stop a film being made? And not just to stop a film being made, but like you say, as a warning. I don't want to say that they definitely would, but at the same time, plenty of people have been killed in Hollywood for all kinds of political reasons. I mean, both me and you, Ed, have done shows on Marilyn Monroe. And you think, if they're capable of that, they're capable of this, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's just one guy.
Right. And, lately I've been interviewing a lot of the Clinton rape victims, I just had, we had Juanita Broderick on. We had, I just interviewed Kathleen Woolley the other day for 2 hours. And they've all been threatened. All these women have been threatened with the same pattern of threats and intimidation. Sally Miller, too, as well. The only movie about that I could think of about Iran-Contra was that movie about Barry Seal with Dennis Hopper. It was a total whitewash, too.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I was going to say, in Air America, isn't it like the plot, they're shocked that they're transporting heroin? Like, they didn't know that? Like, they thought they were just transporting guns for the CIA? And they had this, moral crisis when they find out it's drugs.
Well, the two pilots did, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess there will be a movie dealing with Iran-Contra because there is a new Barry Seal film with none other than Tom Cruise, but that has got CIA fingerprints all over it. So if you are going to make a movie, maybe now it's okay, enough time has passed. They did the same thing they had that the Gary Webb film, again, CIA fingerprints on that. So maybe, now it's a matter of, I think it's enough time has passed that it's sort of in people's, memory holes. So now the CIA is going to approach Hollywood and kind of rewrite the story to how they want it to fit in people's minds. So now no one's going to think of Barry Seal as this, fat coke trafficking assassin. They're going to think of him as Tom Cruise. And I'm sure that's not going to touch on nearly the level of stuff that Barry Seal was involved with.
It's interesting because we got this, we're talking about Iran-Contra, right? And then we're also talking about this theory that there was some kind of blackmail tapes with pedophilia. And then we're talking about who around here in this story, in Iran-Contra and pedophilia on the plane with Epstein, is so hell-bent on killing people, to silence and keep their images, their image looking good. Can you think of anyone?
Khashoggi?
No, Clinton.
Oh, well, yeah. No, definitely. I mean, that's Mina. That's the same time.
Yeah, right. And also pedophilia, too, with the blackmail tapes. Coke dealing, it all seems to be, really.
I think the pedophilia thing is also the big one. That's the one that you can't touch that at all. That's just drugs maybe, because there's still, the people Mitch McConnell's father-in-law just got in trouble not that long, maybe a year ago, for having a couple of pounds of cocaine on his boat. And, you can get caught with some drugs, obviously, but, children is another thing.
Yeah, it's so true. Like whenever I'm like auditioning, I do these little auditions and stuff like that. And I try and get on the History Channel, those reality stuff, trying to get on there all the time. And, they said, what kind of stories you work on? I start getting into the Satanism stuff and the cults, and they're with me. They're going along. And then, as soon as I start mentioning anything with pedophilia or child trafficking or anything, boom, that's it. You never hear from them again. The look on their face changes. No one wants to touch that stuff.
No, it's the same over here in the UK. We've had several years now of massive scandals about pedophiles in the entertainment industry, in the higher levels of politics, all over the place. And has any of it really gone anywhere? Or is it just, it's always treated as this sort of salacious tabloid thing, rumors that some guy touched up a 14-year-old girl. And actually, I mean, since we're on the subject, the media coverage of that issue does bother me because a lot of it does seem to be titillating in its way. It seems to be the way that it's framed. It's, you get to sort of think about, these old guys fondling these 14-year-old girls in private offices and in, country retreats and wherever. And I'm thinking, is that the story here? It really isn't the story here. I don't want to read about that stuff. I don't need to know the details. What I need to know is, who are these criminals and what are you doing about it? Are you actually going to arrest any of these people? I mean, quite a lot of them are dead, but okay, some of them are still alive. And isn't the real story here that this seems to be relatively well entrenched in the upper levels of government, and they keep getting away with it because of their status? That's the story. The story isn't about, some teenage girl's bottom. But that's where the focus is. You know what I mean? That they turn it into this almost pornographic thing, and that's really disturbing to me. It bothers me because it's so much more. It's so much more important than anything like that.
Well, look at these late night comedians. Every mention of Michael Jackson and these little boys is a joke. Like it's a joke.
I think it's a way of just getting people more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So in 20 years, it'll just be accepted that, of course, presidential candidate slept with a 10-year-old. That's, duh, it's okay.
Yeah. It's so entrenched. And here you got Epstein's buddy, Maxwell, Leslie Wexler, who owns this chain of stores where they're selling these provocative clothes to little kids. It's so entrenched. It's just fascinating what's going on in our times here. Listen, we got to take another commercial break. Okay, so remember, guys, mute up, and we'll be back with more of Pierce Redmond and Tom Secker. Pierce is from PorkinsPolicyReview.com, and Tom is from SpyCulture.com. Both really, really, really good quality investigators and researchers. This writing by Tom, this review of this book here, the writer with no hands, is just really, really incredibly well written. I really respect their work, and I recommend everybody to come and check it out. We just recently did a broadcast together. I think it was their highest rated broadcast I've ever done. About the CIA. What was that again called? The CIA
and Hollywood.
CIA and Hollywood. And it's about the movie Good Night and Good Luck with George Clooney, who's another character we'll get into. Okay. So we'll be back with more of my friends here, Tom and Pierce, after these messages. OppermanReport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs, a lot of content there at OppermanReport.com. And it's the memberships that support the Opperman Report and allow us to play these shows for free on Friday nights and Saturday nights on all the stations you hear us on. You can also make a donation at OppermanReport.com. If you want to support the show and become a member, I can give you a discount. I'll give you 13 months for $65 if you email me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at OppermanReport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates. EmailRevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat. Locate his hidden assets. Locate his hidden bank accounts. Find his current place of employment, and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. Emailrevealer.com. Digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages. Create a report that you can use in court. Emailrevealer.com. 800-572-9762.